Bob Buhr is an honorary research fellow at the Centre for Climate Finance and Investment at Imperial College Business School in London. He's joining us now. Mr. Buhr, thank you very much for being with us. Now, this amount of money that Kenya's asking for, $62 billion, is that a reasonable amount, or is it perhaps an underestimate?
Yes and yes. If you look at it over a 10-year period, you're basically talking $6 billion a year, which isn't, an unreasonable figure. There's reason to be concerned that it's an underestimate, though, for two reasons. And if you look at the document all of this is based on, they prioritize drought and flooding, which is appropriate. But there are two other issues, one relating to the picture that we're seeing right now, which is topsoil loss, which is an urgent problem in many parts of the world, where solutions are actually difficult to envision. The second is maybe a more stressing issue, which is water availability. And all of that has the potential to get worse. It's certainly not going to get better. That has to be understood, that what we're looking at in terms of water availability for a number of nations is actually a pretty scary scenario.
Oh, it absolutely is, Professor Buhr. And I do wonder if the amount of money that's being asked for is ever going to be received by these nations that need it. Obviously, they're asking it from the rich nations. Do you expect there to be more money being given?
I have to answer this carefully. I would expect there would be more money to be given. Whether or not it will meet the commitments is one question. Whether or not it will actually be sufficient for solving the actual problems is another. I would mention that what we think of as rich nations, developed nations, have not been doing a very good job at hitting their own targets. Kenya is not alone in worrying that there won't be sufficient funds from developed countries to help them solve these problems.
Now, we're talking about money going from one nation to another. I do wonder what role big business and the fossil fuel companies have to play in this. Do you expect them to be expected to give more money in the future to nations where they have been extracting fuels for decades?
That's a really good question, and it's kind of hard to see that happening without some sort of sustained negotiated agreement. And I don't know that any of that is happening right now. It would be desirable, certainly, for major fossil fuel companies, including the state-owned ones, by the way, to be contributing to some sort of fund. But at this point, and it's not unreasonable to ask whether or not, again, something like that is actually going to happen outside of government regulation or litigation is, again, a critical question.
I mean, what does it take then, Mr. Buhr, to get that kind of framework in place, do you think? We've all been talking about this, the huge sort of train that's coming towards us for many, many years, and it does seem still that it's lots of rhetoric with little action.
Yeah, it's that dilemma of, is it the light at the end of the tunnel or a train coming at you? It's been difficult the last 5 years, obviously in part because of what's happened in the U.S., and hopefully the U.S. will be taking more of a climate leadership role now. But basically what you're talking about is requiring nations to fulfill their commitment. And that would include mobilizing private businesses to the extent that nations have any interest in doing that. And the track record here just is not good, I have to say. So, on the other hand, I will also say that in the sector that I'm most familiar with, which is the finance and investment sector, we've seen, I would say, a really powerful turnaround the last 2 or 3 years on how serious to take climate change. Mm-hmm. It was really regarded as a marginal concern for a long time, even among people who did regard it as a concern. And in the last couple of years, it has clearly moved, along with other ESG issues, to become a very central core of attention. It was previously regarded as kind of an idiosyncratic risk. Now it's coming clear that it's a systemic risk and really needs to be dealt with in that way. And if you get the financial community mobilized in generally in that direction, then governments will tend to follow.
Absolutely. And finally then, how much do you see this as a generational issue? I often think if people of my age, my generation, were in power in government now, we'd perhaps be dealing with the climate crisis in a different way. And I think that statistics show in the United States that younger people younger than me, see climate change as a major issue. I mean, I know we don't have much time left to sort this out, but
No.
do you think, you know, in 20, 30 years' time, those in charge will take it much more seriously than people taking it now?
Oh, absolutely, they will be in 20, 30 years' time. We don't have 20 to 30 years. That's sort of what it comes down to. I would like to think that people my age who have managed to, really make a mess of things, are taking it more seriously now on behalf of their grandchildren. And I see some evidence that that's the case. There clearly is a generational divide. The problem is that, the people in charge right now are still people my age, and they haven't actually been pushing. They're starting to push more aggressively, but you could say not. They really need to be pushed by their grandchildren, I think.
Yeah, perhaps they will
So,
be.
keep pushing.
Absolutely, we will do, Mr. Buhr. Thank you very much for being here with Bob Buhr from the Imperial College Business School. Appreciate your time, sir.